Alright, Title 40, CFR 1033. Control of emissions from locomotives. Subpart G, Special Compliance Provisions. Alright, 1033-601, General Compliance Provisions. Locomotive manufacturer, remanufacturer, as well as owners, operators of locomotives subject to the requirements of this part, all other persons must observe the provisions of this part, requirements, prohibition, Title 40 CFR 1068, and the provisions of the Clean Air Act, the provisions of Title 20 CFR 1068 apply for the locomotives as specified in this part, except otherwise specified in this section. Alright, meanings of terms when used in Title 40 CFR 1068 apply to the meaning specifically determined as follows. Manufacturer means manufacturer, remanufacturer. Two data manufacturer means the data of the original manufactured, freshly manufactured locomotive, the data on which the remanufacturer is complete with the remanufactured engines. B. Engine rebuilding. This provision of Title 40 CFR 1068 120 do not apply with the remanufactured locomotives and certificate of conformity issued under this part. C. Exemptions. The exemption provision of Title 40 CFR 1068 240 exemptions of the replacement engines do not apply for the domestic or imported locomotives. Note that you may introduce the commercial freshly remanufactured replacement engines under this part provided with the locomotives into which they are installed and covered in certificate of conformity to the exemption provision. Title 40 CFR 1068 250 and 255 exemptions for the hardship relief do not apply for the domestic or imported locomotives. 1033 620 for the provisions related to hardship relief. The exemption provision of Title 40 CFR 1068-261 exemption of delegated assembly do not apply for the domestic or imported locomotives except as specified in 1033-630. 4. The provisions of importing engines equipment under identical configuration exemption of Title 40 CFR 1068-350 do not apply for locomotives. 5. The provisions of importing engines and equipment under the ancient engine exemption of Title 40 CFR 1068-315 do not apply for locomotives. Sees and defect reporting recall. Provision of Title 40 CFR 1068 subpart the C provisions that don't apply for locomotives except as noted in paragraph D of the provision of Title 40 CFR 1068. Subpart F applies certificate holder locomotives as specified for the manufacturers of this part. When the multiple persons are meeting the definition of manufacturer, remanufacturer, each of the persons meet with the definition of manufacturer, remanufacturer must comply with the requirements of Title 40 CFR 1068 subpart F as needed so that the certificate holder can fulfill his obligations under those subparts. 2. The defective investigation requirements of Title 40 CFR 1068 501A, 5, B1, and B2 do not apply to locomotives. Instead of use good engineering judgment to investigate the emissions related to defects consistent with normal locomotive industry practice. Investigation defects which are not required to track part shipment as indicated in possible defects. E. Introduction into commerce replacement of the new locomotive engine back into the service of the following with a remanufacturer's violation Title 40 CFR 1068 101A1 unless it has a valid certificate informant for its model year and that required label. Alright, F. Multiple fuel locomotives. Subpart C with the part describes how the test certified with dual fuel, flexible fuel locomotives. C. Multi-fuel locomotives may not fit either or others defined terms for such locomotives will determine whether the most appropriate is to treat them as a single fuel locomotive, the dual fuel locomotives, or flexible fuel locomotives based on the range possible except the fuel mixtures. For example, a locomotive might burn natural gas but ignite combustion with a pilot injection of diesel fuel. If the locomotive is designed to operate in single fuel algorithm, fuel rates are fixed for the given engine speed load condition. We would generally treat the single fuel locomotive with the contents of the combination of diesel and natural gas would it be on its own fuel type. If the locomotive is designed to operate with the diesel fuel alone, we would generally treat it as a dual fuel locomotive. If the locomotive is designed to operate varying mixtures of two fuels, we would generally treat it as a flexible fuel locomotive. Extent that requires very different fuels and fuel mixtures, we may apply more stringent requirements. And that was 601 General Compliance Provisions. Alright, 1033-6010 Small Railroad Provisions. In general, the provisions part apply with all locomotives, including those owned in Class 2, Class 3 railroad. Section described how this provision applies for railroad, meaning definition of small railroad 1033-901. Note that the term small railroad excludes all Class 2 railroads, some Class 3 railroads, such as those owned by large parent companies. B. Locomotives become subject to the provision of this part, but when they become new as defined in 1033-901 under definition of locomotive, the newly first assembled generally become new again when remanufactured. As an exemption, the general concept of locomotives owned when operated by railroads meet the definition of small railroad 1033-901. Do not become new when remanufactured and left with the previously certified with the EPA emission standards certificate. Holds of the may require written confirmation for the owner and operator that the locomotive qualifies as a locomotive that is owned and operated by a small railroad. Such written confirmation of the certificate holder is deemed to be submission to EPA, the subject of the reporting requirement. Title 40 CFR 1068. 101B. The provision subpart I of this part allows the owners and operators of locomotives subject to the part in 1033. However, the regulation of the subpart specifies that some of the provisions apply only with the Class 1 freight railroads. The others apparently different from Class 1 freight roads and other railroads. See, when we exempt the new locomotives owned to be operated by small railroads from prohibition against the remanufacture of a locomotive without certificate of conformity as specified with the paragraph C with exemption is only available in case if no certified remanufacturer system is available for the locomotive. For example, it is possible no manufacturer will certify a system for very old locomotive with the models that comprise a tiny fraction of the fleet that are remanufactured infrequently. We will grant the exemption in all cases if no remanufactured system has been certified for the applicable engine female family model year. We also grant the exemption where we determine that the certified system is unavailable. We may consider the issue of excessive cost to determine the availability of certified systems. If the grant exemption is for previously certified locomotives, you are required to return the locomotive to its previously certified configuration and send your request for the exemption of the designated compliance officer. D. No Class 1 railroad do not meet. Non-Class 1 railroads that do not meet with the definition of small railroad 1033-901 may ask for the remanufactured locomotives to be excluded from the definition in new in case 1033-901. In the case there was no certified remanufactured system available for the locomotive, we will grant the exemption in all of the cases of the non-remanufactured locomotive systems as certified for the applicable engine family model year. If the year exemption is great, exemption of the previous certified locomotive, you are required to return the locomotive to its previously certified configuration. Send your request for such exemptions to the designated compliance officer. That was 6610, small railroad provisions. Title 40 CFR 1033-615, voluntary subject locomotives to standards of the subpart. Provisions section specify for the case of the owner and manufacturer of a locomotive with a similar piece of equipment that can be subject to the standard requirements for this part. Once the locomotive with equipment becomes subject to the locomotive standard for the requirements for this part, it will remain subject to the standard requirements for this part remainder of the service life. A. The equipment excluded from the definition of locomotive of the manufacturer remanufactured equipment excluded with the definition of locomotive because its sole power with but otherwise meet with the definition of locomotive may ask have it considered to be a locomotive to the submitted application for certification specified in subpart C of this part with explain what is considered to be a locomotive. If we approve of the request, then will be deemed locomotive for the remainder of its service life. It's unusual circumstance we can deem the equipment of the locomotive at the request of the owner, manufacturer, remanufacturer, where the equivalent does not conform completely to the definition of locomotive, but is functionally equivalent to a locomotive. B. Locomotives excluded from the definition new. Owners and remanufactured locomotives excluded from the definition of new N33901 under paragraph 2 of the definition that may choose to upgrade the locomotive subject for the locomotive to the standard of the requirements of this part by complying specifically with specifications of certified remanufactured systems, including labeling specification 1033-135. Alright, 1033-620, hardship provision, manufacturer, remanufacturers. If you qualify for the economic hardship provisions specified in the Title 40 CFR 1068-245, we may approve of the period of delayed compliance for up to 1 model year total. B. The provision of the paragraph B intended to address the problems that could occur from the near of the date with a more stringent emission standard to become an effective step for the transition of the Terrier 2 standards to Terrier 3 standards for line haul locomotives on January 1st, 2012. An appropriate extreme and unusual circumstance that clearly outside of the control of the manufacturer could not have been avoided. The exercise of the prudence, diligence, and due care We may permit you for a brief period to introduce commerce locomotives that do not comply with the applicable emission standard following conditions apply. You cannot reasonably manufacture locomotives in such a manner that they would be able to comply with the applicable standards. To the manufacturer, locomotives substantially complied prior to the applicable date with the standards which seek for the relief of the example that may not request relief of the locomotive that has been ordered but will not begin with the assembly process prior to the applicable date of the standard. On the other hand, we would generally consider the completion of the underframe weld meant to be a substantial part of the manufacturing process. 3. Manufacturer locomotives process scheduled to be completed to a such point at a time when locomotives have been included with the previous year such that they would have been subject to less stringent standards that with schedule would be feasible under normal conditions. 4. You demonstrate that the locomotives complete with less stringent standards that apply with the previous model year's production described in paragraph B1.3 of the section described in Subpart C of this chapter that locomotives are identical locomotives certified in the previous model year. 5. You exercise prudent planning. We're not able to avoid violation that have taken all the reasonable steps to minimize extent and nonconformity. 6. We approve of the request before you introduce locomotives into the commerce. 2. You must notify us as soon as you become aware of extreme unusual circumstances. 3. Include locomotives for which grant relief under the section engine family for which they originally intended to be included. 2. Where locomotives are included with the engine family that was certified in the family emission limits above the applicable standard, reserve credits for the covered locomotives covered by this allowance included required information for these locomotives in the end of year report required in Subpart H for this part. C. In granting relief under this section, we may also set other conditions as appropriate, such as requiring payment of fees, negotiating an economic gain that such relief would otherwise provide. 6.20 Hardship provision, manufacturer and remanufacturers. Alright, 1033, 625, special certification provision non-locomotive specific engines. We may certify freshly manufactured and remanufactured locomotives, even the non-locomotive specific engine is defined in 1033-901. Using normal certification procedure, this part of locomotive certified that they would generally treat it the same as other locomotives, except that they are specified with the otherwise provision section provided for design certification of locomotive standards within this part with using engines, including engine family certified in Title 40 CFR 1033 or Part 89 limited circumstances. Remanufactured freshly remanufactured switch powered by non-locomotive specific engines may be certified by the design without test data required in 1033-235 if all the following are true. 1. Before the beginning of the locomotive, the engines are covered in certificate of conformity issued in the Title 40 CFR 1033 or Part 89, effective of the calendar year in which the manufacturer remanufacturer occurred. May use the engine certified during the previous years if they are subject to the same standards. May not make any modification of the engine unless they approve them. To the engine certified with the particle material nitric oxide hydrocarbon standards with a numerical lower than appropriate applicable locomotive standards in this part. Most of the engines are reasonable, projected to be sold used to the certificate with the non-locomotive to the locomotive. 4. Number of such locomotives certified in this section that excludes C30. And in 3-year period, we waive the sale limited with the locomotive models that have been previously demonstrated the compliance of the locomotive standards in 1033-101 in use. We approve of the application specified in paragraph D of this section. B. The certified locomotives designed under the section submit your application as specified in 1033-205 with the following exemptions. 1. Include the following instead of the locomotive test data, otherwise in 1033-205, description of engine that include with the name of the engine, manufacturer engine family identifier engines. 2. The brief engine analysis describing the engine mission controls with the function within itself of the locomotive throughout the locomotive's use. 3. Mission data submitted with the Title 40 CFR 1033 Part 89. 2. You may separately submit with some of the information required in 1033-205 consistent with the provision in 1033-1D. For example, this may be appropriate way to submit with the detailed information proprietary engine software. Note this allows separately submit some of the information required in 1033-205 is available to the application not submitted under this section. See, the locomotives certified under this section are subject to all the requirements of this part except for the specified in paragraph B of this section. Engines used with such locomotives are not considered to be included otherwise applicable engines of Title 40 CFR 1033 Part 89. D. We approve of all of the applications specified in Subpart C for this part. For example, we will deny the application for certification of the design under specified section in any case where was evidence of the locomotive with the non-conformity requirements of the part throughout the useful life. That was special certification provision of non-locomotive specific engines. Alright, 1033, 630. Stage assembly detail, delegated assembly exemption. Linked amendment of the published in Title 88, Federal Register 4486, January 24, 2023. Stage assembly match for the provided temporary exemption to allow for the complete production of the engines and locomotive of the different facilities as long as you maintain control of the engines until they are certified configuration. May require to take specific steps to ensure that the locomotives are in their certified configuration before reaching ultimate purchase or request for the exemption. Paragraph A of the application of the certification or in a separate submission if you include the request for your application for the exemption is approved with the grant certificate if no exemption is needed. The ship the engine has been assembled and certified in configuration. However, the properly labeled will not require the after treatment of the device to be attached to install the locomotive. B. Delegated assembly. Paragraph B would apply for the engine manufacturer. Remanufacturers do not complete assembly of the locomotives and the engine shipped after the manufactured or remanufactured parts they are completely. Provision of paragraph B would apply differently depending on the holds of the certificate, conformity, and state of the engine when it's shipped. You may request exemption on paragraph B with its application for the certificate on separate submission. If you include your request for the application exemption is approved, we grant you certificate. A manufacturer or remanufacturer may request exemption under Title 40 CFR 1068-261 instead of this section. One, in the case where the engine has been assembled with the configuration properly labeled, will not require that the after treatment of the device attached for the install of the locomotive. No exemption is needed to ship the engine. You do not need exemption to ship the engines without specific components if it's not emission-related components identified in Appendix 1 of Title 40 CFR Part 1068. In case of the engine has been properly labeled, the certificate holder is assembled in a certain configuration, except that it does not have the required after treatment of device. Exemption is required to ship the engine. You may ask the exemption if you don't meet the following. You know the engine emission control information label on the locomotive must include the after treatment of device to be covered in the certificate. 2. You may clear the emissions related installation instruction and installation after treatment of device is required with locomotive covered by the certificate. 3. In case where the engine will be shipped to the certificate holder uncertified configuration, any exemption to shipping the engine, you may ask exemption Title 40 CFR 1068-262. See other exemption unusual circumstances. You may ask to provide exemption for the assembly control but not covered with the provision in paragraph A and B of the section. We will make exemptions continually based on the applying requirements determined are necessary to ensure the locomotives are assembled in certified configuration before beginning placed back into service. 1033, 630 stage assembly delegated assembly exemptions. Alright, Title 40, 1033, 640. Provision of repowered, refurbished locomotives. Provision of section apply for the locomotive produced with the existing locomotive. The new locomotive contained previously used parts that have never been used before. Repowered locomotives are locomotives with a freshly manufactured propulsion engine within itself will describe the section repowered locomotive deemed to either be remanufactured or freshly manufactured depending on the total amount of unused parts of the locomotive that may be deemed the refurbished locomotive. 2. Refurbished locomotives are locomotives that contain more than unused parts of the previously used parts and described in the section. Locomotives containing unused parts, previously used parts are deemed to be either remanufactured or freshly manufactured depending on the total of the amount of the unused parts of the locomotive. No. 1033-901 defines refurbishment as pre-1973 locomotive to upgrade over the locomotive. B. Single existing locomotive cannot be divided into parts combined with new parts created with more than one remanufactured locomotive. However, any number of locomotives can be divided in parts combined with new parts created more than remanufactured locomotive, provided the number of locomotives created with the remanufactured freshly manufactured does not exceed the number of locomotives with the disabled. You determine the relative amount of the previously used consistent with the specification Federal Railroad Administration, otherwise determine the relative amount of the previously used parts as follows. 1. Identify the parts fully assembled locomotive that have been previously used that have never been used before. 2. When weighted unused parts of the previously used parts with the dollar value of the parts, for example, the single part value of $1,200 would count with the same as 6 parts value at $200 each. Group part symptoms where possible, such as the counting of the engine as one part. Either all the parts of the system are used and all the parts of the system are unused. Calculating used parts value of using dollar value of the same year as new parts. 3. Summing the value of the unused parts is all sum value of the previously used part with the relative of the fraction used parts and the total value of the previously used parts divided by combined value of unused parts and previously used parts. See if the weighted fraction of locomotive that is compromised previously used parts is greater than or equal to 20%, 5% of the locomotive is considered recommended remanufactured locomotive and retains original data. Manufacturer know-how that the weighted fraction of locomotives compromised previously used parts of less than 50%. The locomotive is also considered to be refurbished locomotive. If the weighted fraction of locomotive is compromised previously using less than 25% of the locomotive of the team, there would be a freshly manufactured locomotive with the date with original manufacturer, not recent date on which the locomotive was assembled, using less than 25% of the previously used parts. For example, 1. If you produce a new locomotive that includes used frame, all other parts unused, then the locomotive would likely be considered the freshly manufactured locomotive because the value of the frame would be likely be less than 25% of the total value of the locomotive, and the date of the original manufacturer would be the date of the completed assembly. 2. If you produce the new locomotive replacing the engine 1990 locomotive with a freshly manufactured engine, but all the other parts of the locomotive would likely be considered the remanufactured locomotive at the date of the original manufacture, the date which assembly was completed in 1990. Note such locomotives will be considered the repowered locomotive. If locomotives containing the used parts of the deemed freshly manufactured locomotives are subject to the same provision, freshly manufactured locomotives, the other refurbished locomotives are subject to the same provision as remanufactured locomotives with the following exemptions. 1. Switch locomotive added January 1st, 2015. Remanufactured Terrier 1 switch locomotive team to be refurbished subject to the Terrier 0 line haul cycle with a switch cycle standard with no difference from the requirements applicable to the other Terrier 0 switch locomotives, which are not subject to Terrier's 0 line haul cycle standards. 2. Beginning January 1st, 2015. Remanufactured Terrier switch or earlier switch locomotives that are deemed to be refurbished are subject to Terrier 3 switch standards. 2. Line haul locomotives. The remanufactured line haul locomotive deemed refurbished is subject to the same standard for the freshly manufactured line haul locomotives, except line haul locomotive rated less than 3,000 horsepower refurbished before January 1st, 2015, subject to the same standard for refurbished switch locomotives under paragraph E11 of this section. Half of the line haul locomotives expect less than 3,000 horsepower may not generate emission credits relative to the standard specified in E11 of this section. Alright, 3. Label switch and line hauls. Locomotives remanufactured refurbishers of a locomotive must be added a secondary locomotive label, including the following label heading refurbished locomotive emission control information. Through the statement identified the locomotive refurbished and subject to this file, the locomotive was refurbished. Year refurbishment must comply with the Terrier applicable standards each time that it is remanufactured, except as allowed by Title 40 CFR 1033-750. Alright, Operational Equipment and Maintenance Component Certification Program. 1033-6045, Non-Operational Equipment and Maintenance Component Certification Program, section described voluntary program that allows EPA to approve of the components you manufacture during the remanufacture. Applicability section apply with the components commonly replaced during the remanufacture does not apply with the other type of components replaced during the locomotive's useful life, but typically replaced with remanufactured certified components may be used to remanufacture other maintenance. Following components are eligible under this section: cylinder lines, piston rings, heads, fuel injectors, turbochargers, and 7 aftercooler intercoolers. 2 catalyst electronic controls not eligible to approved under section 3. We have determined other type of components certified under the section consistent with good engineering judgment. Pre-approval to obtain approval to submit you with the request of the designated compliance officers include all the following in the request of the description of the components which are the requesting approval of the list of the engine locomotive of the models, engine family for which the component would be used with the exclusive of the model is not subject to standard, but the otherwise not be the manufacturer certificate of conformity. 3. To comply with the maintenance instruction for the engines used within this component with the reference of the certificate holder made with the instruction for your instructions. For example, your instruction may specify the following other certificate holder instructions in general, but list one with the more exemptions to drive the specific maintenance needed of your component. 4. Engineering and analysis include the test data with some cases of the demonstrator that they use your component would not cover the emission control increase. The analyst must be driven the low hour end of useful life of the missions. Amount of the information required by the analyst less than they require for the to obtain certificate conformity in Subpart C. However, this part will vary depending on the type of the component certified. 5 of the following statements signed with the authorized representative of the component. We submit this requirement on request on the Title 40 CFR 1033-645. All the information report is true, accurate, with the best of the knowledge, known by the penalties violating the Clean Air Act and the regulation authorized company representative. 2. If you determine that there is a reasonable technical basis to believe that the component sufficiently equivalent will not increase the emissions will approve of your request, you will be a certificate holder of the components with respect to actual emission performance of the locomotive that use the components according to this section. C. Liability. Being a certificate holder under this section means that the testing indicates that the certified locomotive using one or more of the approved components does not comply with any of the applicable emission standards. We will presume that the other certificate holders are liable for the non-compliance, however, they will not hold liable the case when you're convincing us your components did not cover the non-compliance. Firstly, we will not hold the other certificate holders liable for non-compliance caused solely by your components. You are also subject to the warranty with the defect of the reporting requirements of the part, certified components, other requirements of the part, just specified in 1033.1. RD in-use testing. Locomotives containing with your components may be tested according to the provision paragraph D, and except for the specified paragraph D of this section, must at least have one locomotive with the 250 locomotive with your components under this section. Must test one additional locomotive for the next additional 500 locomotives to use the components under this section, as we may require for the test one additional locomotive with the additional 1,000 locomotives that use your component. Under this section, the number to apply with the models, for example, if the component is used with 125 locomotives per year for the under section, you must test one over the first 250 locomotives, one over the next 500 locomotives, up to one every 8 years. After that, do not count locomotives that use the components that are not covered in this section. 2. Except for the first locomotive, your test specific component under the section locomotive of the test in paragraph D, the pass through half the waypoint of the useful life of the megawatt hours. For first locomotive test, select a locomotive that operated between 25 and 50% of useful life. 3. Unless approved with a different schedule, we must complete with the testing report result within 180 days of the earliest point, which complete with the testing based on the hours of the operation accumulated by the locomotives. For example, the 250 or more locomotives of the year part within the section first of the east of the reach 25% of the useful life does. So on March 1st of the given year, you must complete with the testing one of the first 255 locomotives reporting in the August 28th of the year. Unless we approve of the different test procedure, you must test the locomotive according to the procedure specified in Subpart F of this part. 5. If any of the locomotive fail to meet with the standards, you may recover the test additional locomotive that each of the locomotive fails. Make sure that except that you're causing the mission problem rather than continuing test. May also test additional locomotives at any of the time will with the considered failure rates, average emission levels. Existing any difficulties among the other factors of the determining whether the pursuit of the remedial action may order recall with the pursuant in Title 40 CFR 1068 before complete with the testing additional locomotives. 6. You may ask to allow the relying on the testing performance of the requiring you to perform the test. For example, the railroad test locomotive with your component is part of the testing under 1033.810. You may ask to submit the test data fulfillment of the test obligation on paragraph D that is given the test to the locomotive to the different components certified under this section were manufactured different manufacturers such as rings from one manufacturer cylinder lines for another manufacturer single test if they may be accounted towards both of the manufacturer test obligation and unusual circumstances. You may also ask us to grant you hardship relief from testing requirements on paragraph D. Determine whether the grant or the relief will consider all of the relevant factors, including extent, financial hardship of either company and whether the test data available for the other sources of the testing performed by a railroad. Each component certified under the section may be used in the remanufacturing category engines under Title 40 CFR 1042. Alright, that was 10.645 non-operational equipment component certification program. Alright, 1033, 650 incidental use exemptions, Canadian, Mexico locomotives. You may ask exempt the requirement of prohibition of the parts of the locomotive that are operated primarily outside of the United States, but entering the United States temporarily from Canada and Mexico. Approved exemption only where the terminal locomotive of the operation within the United States will not be extensive, will be incidental and primary operation. For example, they would generally exempt the locomotive that will not operate more than 25 miles from the border, operate with the United States less than 5% of the operating time. For existing operation, you require the exemption before January 1st, 2011. In your project, identify the locomotive for which the requesting exemption describe the proposed project used in the United States. May grant exemption broadly, limit exemption of specific locomotives and or specific geographical areas. However, the typical approved exemption of specific rail facilities rather than specific locomotives unusual circumstances. Whatever the case, if the new rail facilities are created, may approve the request submitted in January 1st, 2011. Alright, 1033, 652, special provisions exported locomotives. Uncertified locomotives cover the export emission within Title 40 CFR 1068 230 may be entry for the use commerce to being exported by maybe not even revenue generating surface of the United States. The locomotives covered in paragraph 8 may not include EPA emissions cover the control information label. The locomotive may include emission control information label the country which are being exported. Be locomotives covered with the export certification locomotives may be certified with the export with the Title 40 CFR 1068 230 with the type of locomotive with the entry for the use commerce prior to being exported but may not be for the revenue generating surface of the United States. C. Locomotive included in certificate engine family specified with the paragraph. D. Section locomotive included in certificate engine family may be exported with a restriction note. 1033-705 required that the exported locomotives to exclude with the emission credit calculation in certain circumstances. T. Locomotives certified in the family emission levels above the same of the provision paragraph D apply with locomotive configuration include with the engine family certificate one more fuel family emission level above the otherwise applicable standards include with the locomotive of the exported that may be excluded from the engine families if they are unlabeled. For locomotives that were labeled during the production, you may remove the emission control level information labeled prior to export. All unlabeled locomotives will be exported in subject provision paragraph 8 section. A locomotive of their configuration will include engine family certified one or more family emission level above the otherwise applicable standards that include the EPA emission control information label. When exporting, consider that to be part of the engine family must include the credit calculation. 1033-705 the note that the requirement does not apply to the locomotive that do not have EPA emission control information label, even if they have other labels such as export only label. Alright, 1033-655 special provision certain Tier 0, Tier 1 locomotives. A. The provision section apply only to the following locomotives, then locomotives same in the engine families for the use of the locomotive. The locomotive list in table of 1 section, original manufacturer 1986-1994. General Electric Company have never been equipped with a separate loop after cooling. The section also applied for the equivalent passenger locomotive. You have the D40C, D40B, and then D32B, D40C, WD40BW, D40CM. D41CW, D44CW, the SD70MAC and the SD70IAC with the locomotives originally manufactured in 1996 to 2000 by Electric Motor Division. Any certifying remanufacturer request relief of the locomotives covered in the section may ask to allow the locomotives to exceed the otherwise applicable line haul nitric oxide stand for the high ambient temperature altitude because of the limitation of the cooling system have with the nitric oxide, but maybe the otherwise applicable stand only to the extent necessary relief of the limited with the following configuration. For General Electric locomotives, you may ask for relief of the ambient temperature between 23 degrees Celsius, barometric pressure of 2.8 Hg or 9.7 per kilopascals. Nitrous oxide emission may not exceed 9.5 gallons per BH horsepower over the line haul for any feature within 105 degrees Fahrenheit and altitude of 7,000 feet above sea level. For EMD locomotives, you may ask for the relief of the ambient temperature of 30 degrees Celsius and or barometric pressure of 97.5 kilopascals. Nitric oxide dimensions may not exceed 0.8 grams bhp an hour over the line haul cycle with after temperatures of 105 degrees Fahrenheit. Altitude 700,000 feet above sea level. G. All their standard requirements for this part are specified with the request to relay for the submit with the designated compliance officer along with the application for the certification engineering analysis. So your emission controls operate with the following condition: temperature 2340 degrees Celsius and altitude 7,000 feet above sea level. All altitudes 1,000 to 7,000 feet above sea level for any temperature of 15 to 40 degrees Celsius. That was 1033-655 special provision certain Tier 0, Tier 1 locomotives. And that completes Subpart G, special compliance provisions, control emission from locomotives.